Hello everyone and welcome back to another Regulation H meta trend video where we take a look at some of the Pokemon that are on the rise and of course some of the Pokemon that may be on their decline in the Regulation H metagame as of right now. As always, there are tons of these trends. If you guys do think I missed out on anything going on in the metagame right now, feel free to let me know down below, but let's jump right into things. Kicking today's list off, we are going to take a look at the regular Ursaluna, or the Ursaluna Hisuian form, whatever you want to call it. More importantly, the difference is in speed in the metagame right now. When Baltimore hit, we had that slow pace, that Porygon 2, that heavy, hardcore Trick Room Ursaluna that was meant to just be, you know, that big attacker under that Trick Room, more often than not going to be at that 0 speed stat. And with that, you know, you could have a very slow team. You would orient versus Trick Room. A lot of the times we had, you know, we had the Porygon 2s, you had the Amoonguses. They were all set on dedicated to that Trick Room. Now, that's nothing new. That version of Ursaluna, in my opinion, has also kind of fallen off a little bit. The version of Ursaluna, in my opinion, that I do think is on the rise, however, is that more fast-paced, that more upbeat version of this Ursaluna. We saw it in Louisville. We saw Wolf's team actually with the Yanmega was a very cool option there. We did see that hard Trick Room option as well with the Executor team there in top 4. But more importantly, the spreads are the same. Right, there's nothing new with Ursaluna. Obviously, what you're going to be wanting to go for is that Facade, that Headlong Rush, and then probably that spread damage. I really do think this spread damage is what makes this Pokemon go right now. So having access to that Earthquake that you can kind of just say, I need to hit the board. I need to hit both of your Pokemon, rather than just being able to hit one. It gets you around redirection, which is everywhere in the metagame right now. So I definitely think the uptick towards Earthquake is a very, very likely change that we're going to see continue as the metagame keeps going. Because on that Porygon 2 team, Earthquake, yes, was relevant on some of those variants. But on other variants, they opted for something like Substitute, opted for something like Swords Dance. But I really think having that Earthquake, that spread damage, is really what the key for Ursaluna is going to be moving forward in the metagame. Something else I want to talk about, like I said, and I mentioned at the beginning, is that speed stat. There is a lot going on right now where that hard Trick Room core, well, yes, still being good, I think there's a lot of speed tiers where having a decent speed tier to take advantage of potential Tailwind. I'm going to reference a lot of the Yanmega team that Wolf used. Obviously, there's different variations of it. You can go Vivillon stuff for this Tailwind, but I think having Tailwind beside Ursaluna is something that was a little bit slept on, because now you can have that, you know, that fast mode with Ursaluna, or you can go with that slow mode still. Maybe if that team you think is too fast for you, you can maybe still get that Trick Room team. So maybe piloting this like a Tail Room option, right? So the question really becomes what you want that speed stat, to be. Generally speaking, you're probably going to max out attack or get close to maxing out attack. That is the Ursaluna's strong suit right now. But I think there's a lot to be said at what you want to do on these speed stats right now. And you can hit about 85 is a nice one that outpaces Garchomp in Tailwind. You can go a little bit crazier, jump up to like 90. I believe that puts you, 90 will put you at 180, and that will outpace, you know, the Mouse Hold in Tailwind. That's a fun one as well. There's a lot of these options right now that these benchmarks aren't that hard to hit. You have enough bulk on the physical side. Even the special defense side is not as poor as that Blood Moon Ursaluna, because a lot of the times when you would talk about, you know, fast Ursaluna, we talk often about this Blood Moon, and we talk about the Blood Moon with the Life Orb, and it's going to click Hyper Voice, and it's going to do those big spread things. But the problem is the Blood Moon Ursaluna actually ends up with a lot less bulk than the regular Ursaluna. So having the regular Ursaluna effectively be able to dish out the exact more damage, have a little bit more bulk as well, and still hit a decent speed tier to capitalize off of Tailwind. I mean, you can actually go crazy if you really wanted to, but I don't really know how aggressive you really want to be. I mean, Adamant 102 is kind of like, max speed is kind of insane. I mean, you can definitely do it depending on what you think what you want to hit. I mean, if you really wanted to go crazy, you could probably jump up to like 107 and now outpace Dragapult in Tailwind. I frankly don't think you need to do that. I really do think you're going to want to sit at that somewhat middling speed tier. 91 is a fun stat as well. 90 is good. 85 is good. But I think this is the uptick that I really wanted to talk about, because this is the one that's on the rise. We've seen, you know, that old hardcore, that Trick Room mode happen with the Ursaluna. That's not new to anybody. That's going to be around. It's a good Pokemon. It's a very good piece to add on a Trick Room team. But finding usage for Ursaluna outside of just the Trick Room teams, outside of those dedicated Trick Room teams, I should say, and having that extra speed stat is very, very nice. Right now, even sitting at 85, you are just outpacing a lot of the King Gambits in the format. And all of a sudden, you're pressuring a King Gambit before anything even happens. So you can do a lot with the extra speed stat. I'm very curious to see how much this sticks around, and I really do like this adaptation of the Ursaluna as the meta continues to develop. Moving on is a Pokemon that, once again, is just continues to be on the rise. This Pokemon is good. It was good at the beginning of Regulation. Regulation H, it was good about 2 weeks ago. It was good 3 weeks ago, and surprise, surprise, it hasn't gone anywhere. But what I want to talk about now is kind of the different way people are playing the Goldengo, right? At the beginning of the format, as always with most formats, it tends to be a little bit more aggressive, right? So you end up getting those choice specs variants. You end up getting, you know, just a Make It Rains. You're going to drop big Metal Coat damage with Make It Rain. You're going to Nasty Plot. You're going to just be specs. You're going to be Choice Scarf. But what I want to talk about here is the kind of the hybrid mode that's come out of Goldengo as this metagame has developed, right? Goldengo, it's going to be a good Pokemon. It's always going to be a good Pokemon whenever it's available. Good as Gold is an absolutely broken ability. I don't think this should be surprising anybody. But I want to talk about this half and half mode that normally we didn't see in formats before, and now we are seeing almost everywhere, seemingly everywhere in the formats right now. It's this Life Orb, the Metal Coat, something to have that immediate extra chip on the burst damage. In this case, looking at the Championship Louisville team, that's going to be the Life Orb set, but it also has this Nasty Plot, and it's got that defensive Terra type. Normally, what we were seeing at the beginning of the format, you'd either go hardcore setup and you'd have like the Nasty Plot, the leftovers with your defensive Terra, or you'd pick the more aggressive variant of the Goldengo. But now we're kind of seeing both of those playstyles of Goldengo merge into one, and that is exhibiting itself at the forefront of the metagame right now. And like I said, you just get the best of both worlds. You have the option to set up a Nasty Plot. You have the option to say, well, I'm going to do big damage immediately just off of Make It Rain. I no longer need to set up to do damage, which I think is massive. But now you also have the threat of, well, now they can't just double protect because I could set up, right? So you have the threat of setup, you have the threat of immediate damage, and you also have the fact that now you can defensively Terra as well. And I think all three of those in combination are huge, and they're really making Goldengo go right now, as weird as that sounds. They're making Golden go. Get it? Ha, bad joke. Okay, anyways. But you also see it in Louisville first. You see it in the Louisville top 8. And there are countless teams I could have picked out to showcase this example. This one's a little bit different, but the same concept applies. Right? It's got that Metal Coat for the immediate damage pressure if I want to threaten Make It Rain. It's got the Nasty Plot just so they can't like scout and effectively stall me out and just say, hey, we're going to wait and see what they're locking into. We still have that chance of getting that setup off. And then once again, you've got that defensive Terra. Dragon and Water both at the forefront of the defensive Terras. We have seen a couple Terra Steel Metal Coats. Don't get me wrong. I don't think the offensive one is going anywhere, but I think this hybrid one is really kind of that uptick that I really wanted to talk about, because Goldengo has been around. I don't think it's going anywhere, and it's a very good Pokemon, right? It's one of the considered big 3 steel types in the format right now, and I think it's very, very strong, especially this kind of hybrid offensive slash setup mode, which I don't think a lot of teams are capable, and a lot of Pokemon just aren't capable of actually achieving as well as Goldengo can right now in the current metagame. It's just so good at doing exactly this, being set up, being offensive at the same time. Really, really good, and very curious to see if this kind of separates again, or if it does stay as this hybrid Goldengo at the top of the Goldengo usage charts, because this is a very cool concept, and I'm curious to see how it fares in the rest of the Regulation Age metagame. Moving on, we've got another steel type, and this steel type has not only a special place in my heart, it also apparently has a special place at Lille Regionals, which is first. So Corviknight did just win those previous Lille Regionals there, and I think what's so strong about Corviknight is it's just breaking balance right now. We have a couple sets going on right now. We can see them here, the Brave Bird, the Body Press, that Bulk Up, and then the one that won Lille actually had Power Trip. I'll get into that in a bit. And normally what you see with Corviknight, and I still don't think it's a bad option, and that's that Tailwind, just giving you that secondary, that passive Tailwind support for your team. But I think what we've seen in the metagame is that you actually do not necessarily need this option. You get a lot of good options. We'll take the Louisville top 16 from Alberta Lara for example first, and you just get a lot of good options. You have the setup with the bulk up, you have the roost, so you're not going down nearly as quickly as anything else would, because once you get chipped, you just heal it back up. Body press to capitalize on that defense stat that you have, as well as just double benefiting off of a bulk up. So now you're boosting your attack and you're boosting your defense, and you just start putting out pressure that way. And you have pressure from the physical attack side, and you also just have pressure from a body press standpoint, which covers, you know, some of those dark types into format, like the Incineroars, that as much as you'd want to bring Incineroar to Corviknight, you realistically cannot do that, because like you still kind of have to, but the Intimidate doesn't go off. Mirror Armor is a very strong ability. Flying coverage is really, really strong right now. And just the ability to get set up and put out pressure with Brave Bird and Body Press is very, very strong. And I think this is exactly what we're going to see from Corviknight as the format develops. And once again, I think the bulk up is the key here. We see it in Lil as well with the bulk up. However, the Power Trip, once again, opting for Power Trip instead of Body Press, which is perfectly fine. Power Trip is honestly a move I forgot existed. I'm going to be completely honest. But yeah, it's basically like stored power, but it's a dark type move and it's the physical side of things. So basically every boost you get, you're gaining 20 power on what is a base 20 power move. So after one bulk up, your power trip becomes 60 base power. After two bulk ups, you get plus 80, so your power trip is base 100. So now where Goldengo is normally one of the best answers to you, right? All of a sudden you're pressuring it back with this power trip. The Psychic Seed also gives you that immediate boost. So your power trip at minimum, if this is the first time Corviknight has hit the field with that terrain, you're also guaranteed 40 base power before you even bother setting up. So now you set up one, all of a sudden it's a base 80 dark move, and this Psychic Seed in combination with that was a very, very cool touch on the championship team there as well. Once again, you're going to see a defensive Terra on this. Water 1 Lil, I believe Alberta was fire. Yes, it was. Right, but I think what you're seeing here is just this bulky piece be able to be that bulky piece, and not only are we're drifting away from the Tailwind, which I think was what everybody was trying when they first set it up, and we're just showcasing it as its own Pokemon. You're going to support the Corviknight as a win condition rather than kind of having that hybrid, you know, the win condition and the Tailwind setter for the other win conditions. You're kind of saying, you know what, Corviknight's now that win condition on its own. It's going to be able to bulk up. It's going to be able to roost up. And it's going to be able to send that flying damage, because that's the similarities between both of these. And that's exactly what we're going to see, in my opinion, as the metagame develops. Once again, you don't necessarily need the second attacking option, but I think it goes a long way on Corviknight, because it just makes it a lot harder to wall out, right? If I run Mono Brave Bird and let's say I put Tailwind here, it becomes very difficult to all of a sudden, you know, they switch in a Steel type. I can't do anything, right? Even on the Alberta Lar team, they switch in a Steel type. But now I have the Body Press, so I put pressure on. You know, here it's like they switch in Goldengo. Well, now they can't do anything because I have that special defense boost. I have great stats defensively already. Let's just make this level 50 so the bars aren't as inflated, right? I have great stats defensively already. So I might as well capitalize on those defensive stats. I do like the the Body Press set a little more. I think it's a little more consistent, and it's easier to just kind of slap onto different teams. But the one that won Lil with the Power Trip and the Psychic Seed was a very, very cool cook. And I'm very interested to see if other teams maybe, you know, pick up on this, if it becomes an adaptation on like the base Corviknight with maybe I would doubt like a Grassy Seed would work, because it's not going to be quite the same. But concept would be that, right? I wonder if this kind of concept transfers over to any other teams, or if it's strictly going to be, you know, on the recreations of that Lil team. And just a really cool mod. I love Corviknight, so I'm happy seeing it flourish once again. And we'll see if there's any meta developments going into the next few regionals, as well as LAIC coming up as well. I'm curious to see if Corviknight actually progresses anywhere, or if it just kind of sits around this, and these kind of end up being those sets that prevail, which honestly they probably will be. But it would be curious to see if something else, you know, pops up from these Corviknights. We're going to move on to some of the Pokemon that are now, in my opinion, on the decline. And once again, guys, this on the decline does not mean these Pokemon are bad by any means. People are going to look at me and say, Ryan, Pelipper just got top 4 in Louisville and top 8 in Lil. And you are absolutely correct. This Pokemon is still a very strong option. But I think similar to the next Pokemon on this list as well, they are strong options by necessity, rather than the fact that they are straight up strong options. Pelipper is by far the best drizzle setter in the format. It is your best way to get rain up right now. So any team that really wants to function, especially with those Archaludons, really wants Pelipper there. And that's, in my opinion, why you're using this piece right now. It's still a strong mon. I just really I don't like the board state that rain has been put in the metagame right now. I think it's a lot worse than where we were when the game first started. We've got a lot more of these balancy teams. We've seen the uptick in Ninetales that I talked about in the last Metatrend video. And all of a sudden, Rain's been kind of put on that back burner. People prepared for it. Now, yes, it's still a great Pokemon. And we do see here that actually cool cook here with the Covert Cloak from Louisville in top 4. Just veering away from that Focus Sash set, which I feel like so many players are just ready for now. So being that Covert Cloak, not having to tear a Ghost to get out of the fake out, not being fake outable just immediately is a very, very strong adaptation. And I'm curious if this is the adaptation that takes precedent now. Obviously the Sash is still great. You do not have the best defensive stats as a Pelipper, but I think overall that Covert Cloak is a very cool cook. The defensive Terra type as well is also pretty wild. Electric here was a cool choice. Obviously, I think this is a little bit more of a one-off, more of a cool option that one player found a key with, because I think the more consistent option still is going to be this Focus Sash. But like I said, a lot of players are ready for this Focus Sash, and seeing the Covert Cloak do well, I wonder if maybe Covert Cloak is that adaptation that it needs to stay relevant in the metagame. Yes, it's still around. Yes, it's still good, but I think it's only good right now if you need a rain setter. You're not using Pelipper because, it's the best water type in the format. You're using Pelipper because it gives you the rain and it supports the rest of your team well, right? Yes, it's got some cool things like the offensive flying type coverage, which is very nice as well. But I think as a whole, Pelipper itself is on the decline. It's mainly used for those rain compositions. I'm curious to see, similar to that Archaludon that I said it was on the decline last time, when these Pokemon will creep back into the metagame. Because once again, Rain is a very strong archetype. At some point, people are going to realize, hey, it's falling off. They're going to stop respecting it. And then all of a sudden, it's going to creep back in. I don't think it's a question of where or if. I think it's a question of when this Rain team or when these Rain teams are going to, crawl back into the metagame. Closing this one off, once again, if you are a water type believer, I apologize, but we need to find some better water types. Once again, Primarina, similar to the Pelipper. Yes, still a very good Pokemon, but it is a very good Pokemon, in my opinion, out of necessity. We do not have many fairy types. We do not have that many water types that actually feel good right now. So Primarina, I think, similar to that Pelipper, is being used out of necessity. I do still think it's a decent Pokemon, but it really, I really do think it's fallen off quite a bit. We saw, the Dortmund regionals, where it was that Sneasler, Dragapult, Primarina, that balanced team that really was dominating the meta. It's kind of shifting away from that right now. Obviously, we still have some pretty strong options, right? With Louisville, it did get that top 32, which I believe was actually its highest placing finish, was top 32. I think it was a 21st at Louisville, if I remember correctly. But overall, that was pretty much, I believe it was that standard balanced team. And this is a pretty standard set that we're going to see from a Primarina, right? You've got that Citrus Berry, the Hyper Voice, the Moonblast, the Haze, and the Protect. With Dondozo falling off, there's less necessity to have a Haze user on your team. Amoonguss is still around. It still has access to Clear Smog. That's becoming the more, catch-all Dondozo answer right now than this Primarina is, especially with Dondozo kind of falling off as well. Right, obviously it had a decent run in Louisville, but I think as a whole, Dondozo is not as viable anymore. It's not as widespread. So, you can technically get away without this Haze variant. You can technically get away without saying, I need a Pokemon that has Haze. It ends up being a water type. Primarina is my best option. You don't need to say that anymore. You have other options we can explore. Ninetales is now prevailing as one of the bigger fairy types in the format, whereas we didn't have that before. Right, obviously the Lille top 16 team still had the Haze, because I think if you're going to use Primarina, I agree that you're probably going to want to have Haze. It is a very good catch-all, just clears some of the stats. Very nice for the Swords Dance King Gambits as well. Like I said, still a good mon. Life Orb here, maybe that more aggressive variant, which is something I'm curious to see if we go back in that direction, because at the beginning of the metagame, we had that, the aggressive Primarinas. Then it settled into that Citrus Berry Primarina. And is it creeping back to those Life Orb Primarinas? Are we creeping back to, that big aggressive water type spread move, that big aggressive Moonblast that's going to hit very, very hard? And it's just changing the way players have to play around the Primarina. right? So I wonder if Primarina does adapt and go back to the more aggressive styles, and that allows it to sneak back into the metagame, or if we are just going to see this continuation of this Primarina decline, where people are exploring other water types. We saw Hisui and Samurott had a great performance in Lille. You know, we've seen these other water types now. They're starting to build up, and they're starting to showcase themselves as more prevalent, even not having a water type and using Terra Waters. We saw it on the Louisville winning team. It was a Goldengo, but it was a Terra Water Goldengo. So yeah, you didn't necessarily have the water damage, but you had the water defensive typing, which is kind of that creative way to still kind of have that water type on your team. It is a very good defensive type. So are we finding more creative ways now to just not necessarily rely on this Primarina? Because I'm going to be honest, guys, it's a very mediocre Pokemon. I have never been impressed with Primarina. Now, if you want to trash talk me because, you know, I don't like Primarina, go for it. 80, 74, and a very mediocre speed just doesn't cut it for me. Yes, it has good stats. Yes, it can hit hard. Yes, you can fix the defensive stats to some extent. But I think as a whole, it has been falling off. And I wonder if these offensive variants are going to save it, or if it's just going to be, you know, not quite enough. That is going to wrap it up for this video today, guys. There was a couple others I necessarily could have put on here. I probably should have maybe put on here, but I didn't want to feel like I was forcing these trends. These trends, I wanted to make sure these were the very clear trends that I saw going on in the metagame, and I didn't want to put a Pokemon on here just to strictly have, you know, 3 Pokemon on a decline to be even with the Pokemon that are on the rise. There is a bunch of others that I probably could have talked about, maybe some more minor meta trends. And as always, guys, if you do think I missed anything, feel free to let me know down below. I'm always curious to talk about this kind of stuff, see what you guys see, because I'm just one person looking at this metagame. There's going to be tons of different opinions and tons of different takes as to what's going on. And if you guys do enjoy these types of videos, please let me know. Please feel free to leave a like and subscribe down below. It really does help out the channel. And of course, I really do appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you all in a future video.